Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder of Streamlined Properties and the team leader of Streamlined Properties on Market, brokered by eXp Realty. Whether you are looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Welcome back to another week of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. I know you've heard this before. We've got a great show for you, but this one is a little bit different because we've only had one other attorney besides myself on the show. That was Seth Bradley early on. And this week we have our second attorney, Scott Royal Smith of Royal Legal Solutions. He's going to talk to you all about safeguarding your assets and equity with many different forms of legal protection. I can't wait for you to hear this show. And as you can tell, I'm basically asking questions for myself most of the time. You're going to get a lot out of it too. Remember, if you like this show or you have other favorite shows, do me a personal favor and just share it with a friend. That's a great way to help us spread the podcast around to people who are looking for honest real estate investment advice of the mindful nature. Let's go. This is episode 92 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Scott Royal Smith. Scott is the founding attorney of Royal Legal Solutions, a boutique law firm focused on protecting clients' real estate assets throughout the U.S. and Canada. And they really only work with real estate investors. I can't wait to talk to you. He also has a long history of investing. Scott, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jonathan. Great to be here.
Yeah, I think you're only the second attorney since I'm an attorney too. So we're going to try to not bore them with our legalese, but really help investors with protection. So before I get to your full background on investing, I want to hit right off the bat, where are investors screwing up when it comes to protecting themselves from a legal point of view, whether it's entity formation or something else?
Yeah, most people ask me, when's the right time for protection, right? And they're saying, well, do I have enough to get protected? And really the right time is, would you cry if you lost it? Because if you don't care about it, then why protect it, right? And then if you do have enough then that you care about, then yeah, it's worth protecting. And there's an appropriate level of protection for each person, whether it might just be something as simple as like an anonymous trust to create some anonymity in the ownership of the asset. Could be like a single LLC, or if you have multiple assets, like a series LLC. That's why when people say like it depends on what assets you have, that's why it depends. Yeah. Right. But the right time for everybody right now is to learn. And then for a few people, it will be to take some action.
Yeah, I think that's important too. I think if you look at like across the spectrum, everyone's always asking like, oh, I want to form an LLC. Like you don't have any properties and you don't have a bank account, you don't have enough money. Like you're maybe not ready, but maybe you should learn about it so that when you get ready, you exactly know the steps of what to do. Is there like one part where you're getting, new clients who maybe a lot of times, and I know from talking to a lot of CPAs, like they come and they're like, wow, really not formed correctly. Are you seeing something across the board where there's like kind of an error zone for kind of mid-range investors who just haven't set themselves up right?
Yeah. So sometimes people will have their LLCs formed correctly, maintained correctly, had proper operating agreements to the yearly filings. Most of the time they don't.
Yeah.
Nobody that I've run into actually has all of their LLCs or series LLCs or whatever the case may be structured appropriately with their estate plan and their living trust in part of their estate plan and has everything up to date. Most people have formed things, and that's where their attorney stopped really talking to them. And then years have gone by. And then they're like, well, I haven't really done too much with it. Nobody was asking me too many questions about whether to make sure things were upkept. I didn't really know that I even should be even thinking about that.
Right.
That make sure all my assets are transferred inside of either my living trust or in my LLCs under my living trust or wherever the case may be. And I think that's why people are coming to us, is because we can handle everything all in one stop. And then we also meet with them twice a year at a minimum to ensure that they're doing everything correctly moving forward because ultimately that's how you're able to accelerate your wealth, is to be able to make sure you're not having gotchas pop up where you screwed up in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I do think like a lot of people will get like a will drawn and then just never follow up, and then they'll have 2 more kids and, get divorced, and they still have the same will from, 20 years ago. Similar to this, though, you're building LLCs, buying more properties. But why is it so important to incorporate not just your legal entities, but all of that into an estate plan? Because that's, in my opinion, like you're trying to save it for kids and you're trying to save taxes. This is where you guys can make a huge difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's most people will form a living trust or their will, right? And then they never even transferred all of the assets into it, or they transferred all the assets they had at that time, but now they've acquired a bunch more assets. Well, they wanted to get better financing terms on the house they bought, so they bought the property in their personal name. Yeah, but only your living trust only works if it's held in the name of the living trust, right? So they never transferred it into the living trust there. So there's just a lot of making sure things stay tidy. I think where a lot of people miss the boat is they don't realize what they're really doing is building a wealth building company. They think what they're doing is just like buying some assets, but really what that actually is you're a solopreneur in a wealth building company. And the reason why this whole investing thing seems so hard is because it's a business. It's you starting a business called, I have a legal department and I got a tax department. I have a finance department. I have deal flow, which is how I'm acquiring new assets. But I'm just happen to be the only investor in this wealth building company. And if you can frame your mind around that, then it makes it seem like, oh, that might help you see like, oh, that's why this feels so hard, is because I'm actually an entrepreneur and I just didn't realize it.
Yeah, and that goes to show why it needs to be set up correctly, because I agree. I think a lot of people get into investing and then like, whoa, look, they get a lot of deal flow. So a lot of stuff's coming in. So they're just kind of working in the business and not on the business. And then your overall business, you bring this just pile of mess to either you or a CPA or all of you together to say, hey, what am I doing wrong? And it's a lot because you were just using it as like a side thing that became bigger. Can you just explain the living will and why that's so important for a living trust, for real estate investments, and how to transfer stuff to kids maybe through that?
Yeah, for sure. So just to differentiate, so we have like anonymous trusts or land trusts. Those are just to hold assets or companies anonymously because we want some privacy. Then there's our LLCs that offer us protection if we're ever sued. And then we combine those together so we can have privacy and anonymity, and we can have protection. And there's a whole different other kind of trust called a living trust, which is for estate planning purposes. And what that does is it bypasses probate court. So probate court, if you died right now, right, what happens is all of your assets have to go through a court proceeding, which means they all become public. Who gets what becomes public. And that also can mean that a couple of bad things can happen. Besides that is, one, creditors or other people start coming out of the woodwork saying so-and-so owed me money, right? Yeah. Because now it's public that there's money, right? And then the other bad thing that can happen is, well, some people will contest the probate, And what that means is all of the assets get locked up inside of a court proceeding, which means that all of the assets you thought you were going to pass to your family don't actually get to your family. So they're stuck in this really bad situation. And the way to avoid all of that is just to use something called a living trust. And then at the living trust, you completely bypass the court process. Everything stays anonymously held, and the family gets immediate control of the assets.
Yeah. And then so you actually create the living trust, but then you have to put the assets in the name of the living trust, including bank accounts. Am I right on that?
Yeah, the better way to do it is to have the living trust formed and then have your asset holding company be owned by the living trust. And that way, all of your bank accounts, assets, et cetera, are actually all owned by the asset holding company. So that way, you have one system in process, which is all my assets are held by this asset holding company. If I get into a bad car accident and people try to sue me, they can't get to any of the assets. Because I have all my assets compartmentalized inside of a series LLC or multiple LLCs, if something happens with one asset, they can't get to any of the other assets. You typically want to try to avoid holding any assets directly in the name of the living trust, because if I'm sued, they can try to go after what are the assets of the living trust. The living trust doesn't provide any asset protection.
Right.
So that's why you need the LLC structure for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is more complicated than people think. And that's why I think they kind of like get stuck in the middle. I always, on these episodes, like for a CPA or law, I think of myself, like I think I formed the living trust and then like didn't put in a holding company because you, like you said before, you feel like you've taken a big step, but then there's continual steps, which is why it's so important to meet with your team a couple times a year to see like, hey, wait, you acquired 3 more properties. They don't just automatically funnel into this thing that you have set up, right?
Yeah, and the way that we look at it in that vein is that all of my investing these days is really boring. It's like operators that I know have been working for 10 years. Yeah. They make pretty okay returns. It's like self-storage units. It's really boring stuff. Like like the paths to wealth, after you like understand them, and we've been working on this for 12 years for 2,000 clients. It's actually very predictable. I mean, there's a couple of pieces, but 95% of what everybody's doing is exactly the same in terms of like, what does the wealth architecture look like?
Yeah.
Your 5% that you're doing that's different is the way that you're finding deals, what your contacts are, et cetera. But the wealth part of it, in terms of the asset protection, the estate planning, the tax strategy, yada, yada, like all of that stuff we built out with the systems, processes, and tools because we have the attorneys, the CPAs, the MBAs, and the CFOs that we use like on a fractional or appropriate smaller basis for like each client as they come through. So that's what I always tell people. I was like, your wealth should be boring. Like that should be the exciting part of your life. That should be like, okay, you guys go build a wealth company. I'm busy trying to make money so I can dump it into the company and have the company kick me out assets and cash flow and tax benefits.
Yeah. And then I guess, like I would think like the more boring and predictable it is, the more that gives you the option to take small, educated risks on things that maybe you wouldn't if you thought you didn't have any backing. But to have a whole subset of assets that's like really performing well and boring, that is a good thing.
Yeah, that's what you want, And then if you want to take a percentage of your portfolio and gamble, because you like doing some Vegas,
right?
What am I going to say? I'm going to say like life isn't supposed to be a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
If you read any books on like what it is about, like at least if all the books I've read, maybe if you've read different books that tell you differently, please tell me. But like when it talks about like scaling, right? And what does it take to like scale a company or scale a business? What they continually talk about is that it's systematic. Like there's a system and a process, which means it's predictable and it's the same. But the same to us as human beings means boring.
Yeah.
Right? We don't really like same over and over and over again, but that's actually what it takes to get to scale. Right? So the trick I found is that you try to leverage as much through existing systems and processes as you can to make those part of your life really boring. And then the part of your life that becomes like exciting is like your deal finding, are the ways that you're generating like top line revenue, right? It's like your networking, what deals are you looking at, what things are you excited about there. But the more time you're spending time trying to think through like all the different types of tax shelters I could be using or deduction strategies or whatever, you're not spending that time doing the thing that's actually going to make you the most money, which is actually the most fun, which is the deal finding and the top line revenue production. So just stay with what's fun and stay with what's interesting, and then my advice is everything else in life, kick off to somebody else if you possibly can.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's a who, not how principle. And I think that's where people do get stuck. They're going to spend, the first month of their attempted career just trying to figure out if they should make one LLC or not, when they could just like contact a professional, find out the answer. And then, like you said, focus on the deals. But I guess like a lot of people look at it like, oh, well, I have to pay that. But paying experts to protect you long term is a very, very smart and boring idea. But like I like boring. I order the same thing at restaurants all the time because I don't want to spend $20 and then have a bad meal. I might as well just get the thing that I like. Maybe people can learn from these boring principles.
Yeah, I think so. Especially if, I would say, as one word of advice on that is to hire principals or these professionals that have made money the same way that you make money, right? Whether you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're starting a marketing company or you're a real estate investor or whatever, the best professionals that you can find are ones that have made money the same way that you're trying to make money, because there's a lot of professionals that can understand theoretical pieces, right? But we all know the devil's in the details, right? About what does it take to actually make the thing work. And that's where you want to find people that have the very closest life experience. As like the broadest application of this principle is that you find people that have whatever you want in life, and then you just do exactly what they tell you to do.
Yeah.
And if you do that, life is really easy.
Right.
And you'll make more money.
It's totally worth paying for it because you're getting the expertise and you're also getting that confidence level. And then you're removing all of that from your plate so you can go take your time and spend it making more money. That's where I just think, as people adjust on their journey, once you're at scale, like you said, you can understand, you factor in the costs that it takes to have your whole team of professionals. But in the beginning, when you're not sure what you want to spend, that's where people make mistakes by not hiring and not realizing that's going to free up all their time, to go for those deals and figure out, those things. It's like trying to manage properties on your own, when you're new, before you realize like you don't even like talking to people. So how are you going to be good at property management?
Well, there's also some like really critical like strategic things that happen early on, like in the process, right? So like if we just take asset protection as like one field of study, right? So old way of doing asset protection is you take a bunch of underlying LLCs, and then you hold one piece of property in each individual LLC. And then you have all of those LLCs owned by a Wyoming LLC to give you anonymity. And it's called a hub and spoke model, or like a mothership and child model, right? So this turns out to be really complicated. Great protection, but complicated and expensive because you have to form all those LLCs. You have to maintain them all every year. You have to pay the state filings. You have to file all the franchise tax reports and public information reports. And so it's like, great, I have great protection. I have compartmentalization of each asset and I have anonymity, but I'm having to pay a lot and probably having to work or do a bunch of work.
Yeah.
Right. To be able to keep it together. Or what you can do is use a series LLC, which you can form in, Delaware, Texas, Nevada, or Wyoming that have charging order protection. And at the series LLC, it's one company that's formed, one company maintained, one bank account, one set of accounting books. And what it can do is create these things called child series, which is just basically like its spawn. And there's there's child series A, child series B, child series C that all sit underneath it. Each child series acts just like an LLC, but they're totally free to create, and you don't have to pay anything to maintain them. So now you get an infinitely expandable company for free. So that one principle, if you're a single family or 1 to 4 unit type of investor, right, can save you thousands of dollars and tons of headaches.
Yeah.
But if you don't talk to the people that have walked the path before, and ideally about other people walk the path before, you wouldn't even know that something like that existed or was available. Or you would have heard from somebody else like, oh, that'll never work, but they're just whatever person, right?
Yeah.
And not the people that actually help solve the problems. And that's why I say for like everybody, you want to, start with the end in mind, and work with people that can help convince you that they have walked the journey themselves and help other people do it, and can introduce you to materials to help get you educated about what it is the best thinking is. And if they blow your socks off with what it is they know that you don't and that you haven't heard of before, that's probably a good bet of who to work with.
Yeah, I always say that though about podcasts. That's why it's great having experts like yourself on, because you can go 45 minutes and you can tell if somebody's like bullshit or not. There's so much on social media now where it's like, everybody is an expert in everything, but then not everybody can just handle 45 minutes of just like live conversation about their expertise. And I think that helps people know like, oh, there's no breaks, there's no stutter in the game. Like they have a lot of different ways to pivot. And I think podcasts have helped people, vet this type of industry like that.
Yeah, you need long form conversation with experts that can dive into the details. You should be able to tell from how well people can explain the concepts, how simply they can explain the concepts as like what real mastery. Because real mastery, from what I look for when I'm listening to people, is can they take something that is otherwise really complicated and then make it seem pretty simple and be like, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, good. Right. So that means they must really understand it.
Yeah, I can see that series LLC model being a huge advantage for flippers who are mass flippers, but who like to hold single member LLCs on each property. They flip 123 Main Street, so they do 123 Main Street LLC. And because it does become a bear, especially like in California, like LLCs are like expensive every year. We had like 6 at a time, and then we shut down properties, and we're like, what are we doing with all these? I don't think we had a series at the top. So
yeah, and like California is like one of those special situations, right, where we actually will use something called a Delaware Statutory Trust, because it allows us to have the same types of protections that you get with an LLC, but it's a trust, so it's not subject to franchise taxes. So, that's for flippers, people that are owning land, any like 1 to 4 unit property owners. And then we'll combine any of these structures with land trusts, so that way we can use the St. Germain Act to transfer the assets with the existing indebtedness into the new structure. and leave all of the financing that's in place with the existing financing. So you can go get the cheapest bank money that you can get, right? That conforming loan money. You buy that asset inside of your personal name. You transfer that into the land trust. Land Trust A is owned by Child Series A of your DST or your Series LLC. And now it's protected. It's held anonymously. We got the cheap financing in place. And if you're in California, you've avoided the franchise taxes, or otherwise, you've been able to avoid having to form a bunch of individual LLCs. So it's like the game runs deep, and it ties all the way into like what is the investing strategy you need to be to know what is the right tax structure and asset protection structure, which is why I think you really need to work with people that like actually are in the business, because it's otherwise you just end up going sideways.
Yeah, I think you made a good point before. It's like specialties. Like, do you want to? I always just talk about CPAs, but this obviously applies to exactly what you do as well. If I go to a CPA and they're not a real estate investor specialist, they're not going to find me all the things that I need them to find. They just don't know, because they're just doing general practice. You have made it a point to work mainly with real estate investors. Has that helped you make it easier to bring in more investors, get more referrals in, because that's your focus?
Yeah, I mean, it's easier. Well, one, I was a real estate investor first, right? Like I bought my first property while I was in law school. I bought a commercial building and auto transmission shop during my second year of law school for like $10,000 in back taxes, and then flipped
That's an interesting first one, though.
Yeah. I mean, I knew I could like resell it for 15. So I was like, all right, easy. So I'll make a quick 5K.
Yeah.
But then we looked at it and we're like, I think we can actually do this while I was working for the district attorney and going to law school and running a business with a partner of mine who's also in law school. So we didn't sleep a lot for that period of my life. But
I remember,
we're trying to do all these things. But I was able to graduate from law school without any debt because of that. And then I continued to invest in real estate while I was working in litigation and suing insurance companies that didn't pay out on valid claims, right? Then I was able to get my financial freedom through real estate investing. Just went out climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, traveling through Africa and South America, like doing that whole dream. But then I realized pretty quickly that I was like, oh man, a friend of mine got sued for $3 million. He was just using insurance. I was just using insurance at the time and umbrella policies.
Yeah.
So he got clobbered from that, and which was my big wake up call that I was like, oh, I need to get serious about how people are really doing this. And that's when I started really like trying to study really deeply with groups of like guys that were entrepreneurs and were heavy into real estate and had much higher net worths than me. And that started with nothing. Those are the people I was looking at.
Yeah.
And that's where that was my focus to study. And that's what Royal Legal Solutions became, because it was just an extension of here's all the things I had to learn along the way. And that I learned from people that are worth, 5, 10, 25 million, 100 million, how the game changes and how their thinking changes. The majority of our clients they're just starting out, and they got some cash and they're looking to buy assets. Average client's probably worth, 1 to 3 million, but we got some guys that are like in the 5, 10, 25 million range as well there too. But yeah, specializing in that area just was natural because it was what I was doing. So it wasn't really intentional. It was just, I figured out this stuff. I guess I can start a firm because other people are asking me, can you help me do what it is you're doing for yourself? And as an attorney, I was like, yeah, actually, I can totally do that.
But much better, I think, knowing that you've been through the ringer as an investor as well, because it just provides the backdrop to like, hey, I needed to do all this to protect myself. So now I really know, what to do to protect others, as opposed to, again, social media, everybody's doing a syndication now, but have they really done one? I'm not sure. I don't think so for a lot of them.
Hey, this is Jonathan. Thanks for listening to another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. On this brief interlude, I wanted to tell you that we have a mailing list. I actually don't love mailing lists. There's so much. This is not an automated mailing list where you get on a drip campaign. These are written once a month, will eventually be at once a week again by me, direct, and they're not spammy. So if you want to sign up for our mailing list, you can go to bit.ly/streamlined with a D mail. Bit.ly is bit.ly/streamlined mail. See you there.
on your investing journey, what was your asset type that you liked the best, during the time when you were getting started before you started this company?
Yeah, I mean, my start was boring, right? I mean, it was single family homes and I was wholesaling. I was wholesaling assets and then just keeping the guys that were the really sweet deals for myself.
Yeah.
That would come up, and then built my portfolio that way, hustling, working hard, man. I was young.
Yeah.
So I was hustling super hard at that time. Since then, like the investors I started helping were like doing land and apartments and commercial buildings and different types of syndication offerings and whatnot. So that's when I really started to like broaden my own horizons. So now I'm into pretty much everything. I pretty heavily focused into syndications because I value my lifestyle, more than I do wanting to. More money at this point for me isn't going to really do anything that's materially going to be any different.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is I try to find more and more people, but I got like my core guys that are absolute killers when it comes into what kind of deals they put together. And I just surf their wake. I'm happy for them to make money in the deal. And I get really boring, really predictable, easy money. And I don't really have to think about it too much. It's like, cool, what's the new deal, Hitchem, that we got going on?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Self-storage units for building New England. Awesome. Send me the PPMs. Let me look at some stuff for a couple hours. And, I've been working with them for so long that I'm just like, great. That sounds great.
Yeah, right. Let me look at the monthlies and let me just get the returns. Though, I mean, again, though, that's boring, but that's successful long term. I think over my career, I like doing a lot of stuff, but like the older I get, the less I really want to be like a full on participant in a lot of the stuff because like I have other stuff to do. So syndications have become as well interesting to me. When I was younger, I wasn't really thinking about them because I grew up with my dad, who was also an attorney. I mean, he was like protecting assets in like some old school way, like drawing up contracts. And we had LLCs that were clearly not necessarily formed correctly, but like probably, but maybe not filed. So we went through all of these legal entity things over the years. Is there one asset class now from a legal perspective that looks good for a portfolio build right now, in your opinion?
I don't know what you mean. What do you mean from like a legal perspective?
Well, no, I mean, like if you're trying to like maximize a portfolio, let's just say diversification and something that fits within a normal portfolio where people don't have to create as many entities or things that we were talking about.
Yeah. So I typically say that your best bet is going to be going into. A lot of people want to start with owning real estate because they really get like involved with like hard assets. But I personally think you should just skip all that and just focus on top line revenue money and push money into syndications because those guys are much better investors than you'll probably ever be. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just really about like learning what's the asset and the type of person that I'm looking for, because who is a lot better than the what. And for most people in most circumstances. Right.
Yeah.
That's not your bag. That's not your bag. Right. But ultimately what it really comes down to is you're probably want to do something with right now it's self-storage units and trailer parks are going to be your real estate assets that are going to be cash flowing strong and going to give you bonus depreciation for your taxes if you can qualify as a real estate professional or your spouse can qualify as a real estate professional, so you can get like use those tax benefits to offset active income. And if you can't do that, then there's not really any money in Airbnbs anymore. Like, because what's happening with the market, we need a market correction for that really to come available to use those types of asset plays for your tax benefits. But I really like a lot of my oil and gas plays right now too, for people that are W-2 income, otherwise can't qualify as a real estate professional or have a spouse qualify as a real estate professional. And that's where, I'll put some of I have a small W-2 from my company. So I have to make some of those types of investments for that purpose. But yeah, that's what I would say is right now, like, where's the easy, safe, good money?
Yeah. Again, I mean, that goes back to what we've been saying, though. Boring is smart and it's just going to keep earning you in the background. I think a lot of people, get in, to try to make the big money, but like it doesn't work that way. As you learned probably from wholesaling, it's not that easy. But what I would say, one thing to go back to what you said, because you started in wholesaling when you were younger, to me, like the best wholesalers are one who start off doing the job for themselves, and then they get good at marketing and they just have overage. So like you said, you were picking out the best ones for yourself, and like you don't want all the deals, instead of like the whole intent behind it being try to squeeze money on the spread on each one. If you're good at marketing, you're like okay delivering to your friends,
like, hey, I have these overages. Do you want them? Instead of like trying to get $50,000 on a spread on a wholesale.
I mean, it's whatever way you're going to make money off of it, right? But if you don't have any money, then most people are like, well, I'll either be a real estate agent and then I'll pay a broker a fee to do the marketing for me, or I'll learn how to do marketing and sales and I'll become a wholesaler. You got to, like, what I come down to is like all of these things are entrepreneurial skills. So, whether you're building a wealth building company, whether you're going to become a wholesaler, now you're having to learn like sales and marketing.
Yeah.
If you're a real estate agent, you're just having to learn sales, right? If you're going to be like an investor, that's a whole different ball game. Now you're having to like underwrite business plans and financing plans and HR because you're actually vetting like an operator and what's their history, what's their character, right? How do you evaluate all of like those things that come into it? So it's really, at the nuts and bolts at the end of the day, it's, realize like, just pick a category in life. If you think through like, what are the skill sets that I really want to be learning right now, that'll probably tell you where you want to be going.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who think like, hey, multifamily seems interesting. I'll just go into that. And then they don't like people and don't want to deal with the tenants. And then they never do it. The properties are falling apart because they don't want to pay property management, but they also don't like to take the calls. Like being a landlord's not fun. Nobody's like, yay, landlording's the best. It could be good money, but that's why property management exists, to create that buffer between the two. For somebody who's like someone who's working on becoming an investor, is there anything that they should do to set them up, formation wise before they invest that might help them make it a little bit easier when they do start to do it? Because everyone talks about LLCs, but like, I don't know, if you don't have 2 years on tax returns, it's harder to buy in an LLC if you don't have cash. So is there something that people should do to prepare themselves in the beginning?
Yeah. So at the very beginning, right, I believe that everybody should have that's serious about creating wealth in their future should probably have at least a 2-company structure. So they need one company that's likely if they're going to start in the 1 to 4 unit space for assets, a series LLC. If they're just going to be buying like syndications, then just even a single LLC. But that LLC, that asset holding company, holds all of your cash, it holds all of your stocks, it holds everything that otherwise you would have inside of your personal name. Because ultimately what you're trying to get to is that place where you, like rich people do, they don't own anything, right? They have companies that own everything.
Right.
So that way, if they get into the car accident, that exceeds the limits of liability of the car insurance policy or whatever, then they can't get to any of the wealth. So it's great. You can sue me all day long, but you can't get to any of my money, right? Why is that? It's because it's inside of this asset holding company. What's the right asset holding company? It's going to depend upon what kind of assets you're trying to get into, right? Yeah. And how you're going to build that wealth. But that's likely either like a DST, a series LLC, or one LLC to start with, and then other ones as you grow. So that's one company. Your second company is what I call an operating company. And that's a single LLC that does everything, but it doesn't own anything. Right? Whereas your asset holding company owns everything and doesn't do anything. Right? This is operating company is the exact opposite. It's going to do everything and own nothing. And the reason why is because what we want to use that operating company for is like a fall guy, right? We want it to separate, Jonathan from anybody who he's Jonathan would otherwise sign contracts with.
Yeah.
Like with like somebody who's leasing one of his properties or a contractor that's doing work or whatever, right? Because all of those interactions have certain types of liability, whether it's like they're going to sue you because they said, the contractor does a crappy job and you say you don't want to pay him and so he tries to sue you, right? Well, that hurts your credit score. Well, if it goes against that LLC, that operating company, now it doesn't hurt Jonathan's credit score, which means Jonathan can still go buy more property because he can still qualify for the loans that he needs to, right? So that way, that operating company protects you personally from what's going on in the world, and your asset holding company protects all of your wealth. It's like your vault of assets. So if I'd say for anybody that's starting out, just build with the end in mind, which is decide, okay, what's going to be my investing plan? Yeah. And then after you know what the investing plan is, then you can start putting in the small pieces of the puzzle that like Lego blocks you can build onto as you go. And that's what skilled professionals are going to be able to help you do, is to set foundations and then also to be able to make it have enough, make it so that there's enough flexibility inside of the structure so that wherever you go in the future, you don't have to tear the whole thing down and start over again.
Yeah, I think that was a really good description, because I just know from just being on Bigger Pockets for so many years and being in the forums that like everyone's just obsessed with that. Just, can I get the first LLC? But the way that you described it as one's operating and one's holding really makes sense to me. And I think it will make sense to a lot of listeners. You have one that's just running all of the stuff, but the other one's just holding the assets, which makes a lot of sense and just reminds me how many things I've done wrong in my career. So thanks for that.
Yeah, well, we're always learning, man. I've only spent 12 years thinking about one thing,
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, but that's why you hire a pro in the area instead of continuing to try to do all the stuff, yourself. I think like I've probably done that a lot in my career in investing. And it's like, yeah, if you want to get good at a certain type of investing, like you need to be hobnobbing with those people. You're not just going to learn multifamily like on your own. There's other people who are better than you. So,
right. You got to find the people that have like done it before,
Yeah.
Been in there.
Yeah. Has anything changed with this whole, like we went through the pandemic and now we have high interest rates in terms of like structuring and what you're helping your clients do? Has anything changed now other than like people should have more patience, which we both definitely agree with? I know you said that in your form and I've been preaching that, like, just relax. Like you don't have to buy, you can. But has anything like adjusted the way that you've looked at it because of the oddity of the pandemic and then high interest rates now?
Well, it's just harder to get into stuff that's smaller, The easier that where all the returns are at are going to be on larger purchase buys, like 25 million acquisitions, So those are going to be like larger apartment complexes, self-storage units, trailer parks, and they're probably in syndications, right?
Yeah.
So where things got really expensive was for end user and people that were unprepared for having the right types of loans and the right types of financing relationships. A lot of those syndications got popped and they blew up because they weren't with people that had been in up markets and down markets.
Yeah, exactly.
They were promising huge returns, but those huge returns were only going to happen if everything worked out right. So, where the deals that I'm invested in, the places that I still push money, they're great returns, but they're not the absolute best returns, because I'm actually much more interested in having operators that say, we're going to actually invest in more security, which means we're not going to have as high of a return.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're going to have some stuff that's going to be interest rate protected, like on our loans, right? And those things cost more money, which means the returns to the investor are less, right? But right now, that's what I'm saying is that the only real places to push cash, if you to do it right now, are going to be in syndications. And I always like the syndication deals that are going to give me good tax benefits, because the best returns that I make on an investment are actually my tax benefits. They're immediate. Yeah. It's all year one. I can accelerate the depreciation. Like on a $100,000 investment, I get 180% bonus depreciation for that. So I got $180,000 in depreciation if I'm at a 25% tax bracket. Well, pretty soon I'm like at, what is that, like $40K that I've saved just because of taxes. So my $100,000 investment, I make back $40,000 in year one just because I didn't pay taxes. So then, then everything else is gravy, that's on top of it. So that's the way I think about investing right now. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody else, but that's what works for me.
Yeah, it should. I mean, it fits our theme of like, do what's smart and boring. Because look, I mean, if someone's new, just say they have like $250K to burn right now, that is investable and they don't want to do it high risk, and they can weigh either trying to flip a house for the first time while they still have a full-time job, or investing in 2.5 syndications with vetted operators who've done this 40 times and have a history. I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. But I think people like the flashy stuff, which is, hey, let me try to flip a house. But like, now's not a good time to flip a house. If you're going to even use your own money or get hard money now, you're going to pay a lot. It's going to take 2.5 times as long and cost just as much, more than you thought, as opposed to focusing on operators who, like you said before, they know better, or hiring people who are better at taxes or better at legal formation so you can save yourself for later.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. 100%. It's, you gotta, there's like the season for everything. And this is just what that season is. And you can also just sit on your cash and pay taxes. there's nothing that's like necessarily sinful about that, right?
Yeah.
If you're not ready, you don't want to do anything that's going to give you heartburn. That's going to be like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to die inside every day because I don't. All right, well then don't, for the love of God, life is about living and being okay with how things are going. And if you have to pay some taxes, that's way better than having, feeling like the floor is going to fall out from underneath you.
Yeah.
But there are ways in which to be able to become comfortable, right, with what are more advanced asset protection, estate planning, strategic tax, strategic investing into syndications with vetted deal partners. And how do you do that? And that's why I built Royal Legal Solutions, is because I wanted a place where people could have a one-stop shop and get, I even like the vault that we have on the website. I have like 11 ebooks, a couple hundred hours of videos in there that are educational videos, kind of just because I was like, well, this took forever to learn,
right.
For me. Right. And so I was like, well, this will make it easy for everybody else to learn. And then the company will just do it for them if they want to pay for it and have it built for them, and then train them how to use the stuff that we built for them. But at the end of the day, it's just about taking some kind of action, either like free action to learn, or invest in dollars to have people help guide you to accelerate your learning. But if you're not taking action into it, you're never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Life is going to be exactly the same. You're probably not happy with where your life is at right now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to podcasts. You would just be smiling, looking out the windshield, saying, how great is my life right now?
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I got to go listen to a podcast about real estate investing. Well, you probably want something in your life to change.
Yeah.
Which means that you can't just listen to a podcast. You actually have to do something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point, though. And connecting with professionals, going to meetups and like reaching out, doing those Zoom calls, seeing if it's a good fit. Still, you do have to take action at one point. You can take a lot of Zoom calls with pros and like soak up the info. But if you just go home and do nothing, like nothing's going to happen, as you said.
Yeah, you got to get into something. And the best way is just to actually start. The big bullet usually is about like actually placing money into a deal. And if you use that as your benchmark to say like, cool, in 3 months, I'm going to make an investment. Say if you have $250,000 net worth, I'm going to make an investment for $50K. I'm going to deploy $100,000 in 3 months.
Yeah.
Then you can ask yourself some really good questions like, okay, what would I need to do? Or what would I need to have in place? Or who do I need to be talking to feel comfortable and confident that $100,000 is going to be responsibly taken care of and that responsibly placed. And then that will help you discover like, what is the stuff you're doing that's just wasting your time? And what is the stuff that's actually going to help you drive you towards the ultimate goal, which is I want my money placed in a place where it's safe, has predictable returns, and gives me what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Smart and boring, just like we've been preaching.
Yeah.
Scott, is the best place for people to get in touch with you, royallegalsolutions.com.
Yeah, royallegalsolutions.com is the homepage. We have a 30-minute video like on the homepage there that will walk you through. Here's everything that you need to know about how to build a wealth building company, all the professionals, the structures, how everything is supposed to work, whether you work with us or not. It's just a great primer on here's what's really needed, right? If you're really wanting to build wealth and to help shortcut years and years and years of learning down to about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
We have a scheduling link underneath that where you can meet to talk directly with the paralegal to see if you're somebody that meets our criteria of somebody that we know that we would be able to hit a home run for. Because we're not the most expensive, but we're also not cheap, right? So we really want to make sure that we're only going to work with people that we're really going to be able to deliver a serious win for. And then we also have the vault on the top right-hand corner of that page at royallegalsolutions.com. And that's how you get access to the 11 ebooks, a couple hundred hours of video training. It's where our community interacts with each other of other investors.
Yeah.
And so royallegalsolutions.com is really the best place to get started with everything.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think some people's eyes are going to be open. Some might have to replay it twice because we did go through a lot of stuff. But like, this is the kind of episode that we've helped you set up a framework for what you can do. Scott gave great advice on the two things that you could set up so that you're ready. And then maybe people will listen to us and think boring is cool again. It is. That's wealth building, right?
Yeah, that's what it is, man. And the beautiful part is that we typically are able to take somebody from absolutely nothing to a fully built wealth building company inside of 6 weeks. And then we train them how to do it, all of the mechanics of everything through the course of the year and like weekly or monthly and quarterly meetings, right? So it takes that 12 years of having to work to build all this stuff, and it takes it down into 6 weeks. And then you have a professional team that's all in-house and fully built for you. That's responsible for supporting you and you making decisions and training you how to do that. So I hope people take me up on it, because this stuff is not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's so easy once you know what to do.
Yeah.
Right? The hard part is all of this stuff, listening to a bunch of podcasts, talking to a bunch of people and being super confused.
Yeah.
And once this part of your life is done, then everything else accelerates super fast, because getting to financial freedom is the number one most important thing in your life, maybe after like your wife and children.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I read something, though, on your site, too, that you realized like early on that it's not just about building the wealth, because you can build it. If you're not actively protecting it, you're really not helping yourself. You're setting yourself up with a house of cards that could, fall later. So these things, it's cool to build it, but like you got to protect it all, too, and put it in the right structures, especially for your kids and your family, just in case something happens or when it does, you want to prevent all the tax consequences that could come from being unprepared. I think I'm just talking to myself right now. It's like, I just should put something on Call Scott right after you get off this.
Yeah. Hit it up, man. I think it's a good point, though. And all you have to do to really do that is just actually just be proactive. If you're just proactively looking and with the really serious question about like, how do I establish durable financial freedom so I can become financially free, stay financially free, make sure that my family's going to be taken care of. Those are the questions that I was obsessed over.
Yeah.
And building out, everything there. So I have all that free training, though. It's just on royallegalsolutions.com for everybody that needs or wants to either have those conversations or just wants all the free information about, here's where you can really nerd out on what's really there. And it's all my training.
Yeah.
For free.
Do it and then take action. Make the call, because you're not going to do it yourself. You're going to think you're going to do it and you're never going to do it. You need a pro. Awesome, man. Well, it was a pleasure to speak to you. I'm definitely going to be in touch, because I'm traditionally like, I've known how to do everything my whole life. My dad taught me everything. And then I get busy trying to do like 15 things. And then I'm not accomplishing the safety mechanisms that I need to. So you will be hearing from me. I appreciate your time coming on. I think this is a great episode. You're only the second attorney after Seth Bradley besides me on the show. So we're coming in strong on these, though. I really appreciate your time.
Heck yeah, man. Great to be with you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks. That was Scott Royal Smith of Royal Legal Solutions. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green. And I just want to remind you, and this is always an uncomfortable part, I don't want you to think that I'm begging for you to like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do for the podcast, leave a 5-star review. But if you like the podcast and you think it adds value in the real estate investing sphere, then just do me a personal favor. Like the podcast, follow it, share it when you can with your friends, and be so kind as to write a 5-star review if you believe it deserves a 5-star review up against what else is out there. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you keep listening.